Why North Korea built nuclear weapons is a very important question. Depending on whether its goals are offensive or defensive, the United States, South Korea, and the rest of the world would need to respond in different ways. But the truth is, no one knows North Korea's real intentions for sure, and no one can state them with confidence. In fact, except for Kim Jong-un himself, even North Korea's top officials may not fully know the true goal. And realistically, even though North Korea had a very established goal, its goal can change depending on the situation. Needless to say, once conditions improve, it's very likely the country will return to its original goal.
From the beginning, North Korea's motive for pursuing nuclear weapons was clear: reunifying the Korean peninsula under its own control. This is actually a goal both Koreas share, but conflict arises because each side insists on reunification on its own terms. North Korea started the Korean War in 1950 to take over the South by force, and during the armistice talks, it began researching nuclear weapons. In other words, after failing to conquer South Korea because of U.S. intervention, North Korea turned to nuclear weapons as a way to make future reunification possible. That is why Pyongyang continued its nuclear weapons program for decades, despite international pressure and sanctions. As South Korea became richer and stronger, some scholars, especially progressive South Korean academics and policymakers, began claiming that North Korea had shifted its goal from reunification to regime survival. They argued that, because of its poverty and internal problems, North Korea now mainly wanted to keep its system alive. South Korea's sunshine policy in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and its unconditional denuclearization talks in the late 2010s were based on this assumption.
However, the regime survival idea is mostly speculation. There is no solid evidence for it. It's based on a South Korean way of thinking, that a poor and weak country would naturally prioritize survival over aggression. But North Korea has never said in any document or speech that its nuclear weapons are for regime survival. Instead, it repeats that the United States has hostile policies, but that is really just an excuse to justify its nuclear armament. The United States has never threatened North Korea at a level that would mean immediate destruction if North Korea didn't have nuclear weapons. The United States simply followed the armistice agreement.
The belief that North Korea shifted to a survival goal is based on South Korean rationalist thinking, not on what North Korean leaders actually believe. North Korea's leadership probably does not see its regime as unstable. In fact, they may think their system is stronger than before. As for poverty, both North Korean leaders and citizens are so used to it that they may not see it as a major problem. Poor countries don't always experience uprisings. North Korean leaders tell their people that the U.S. could attack any moment to boost loyalty, but in reality, they probably believe the U.S. will never attack them.
The biggest problem with the regime survival argument is that North Korea's nuclear capabilities go far beyond what would be needed just to protect its regime. You don't build a hydrogen bomb, intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and a nuclear-powered submarine just to survive. Producing more than 200 nuclear weapons is also far beyond any self-defense need.
In fact, since around 2022, after North Korea had already developed a large nuclear arsenal, North Korea has increasingly signaled that its goal is reunification, or the annexation of South Korea using nuclear weapons.
On April 25, 2022, in a speech marking the founding of the North Korean military, Kim Jong-un emphasized a second mission. When you analyze it, the first mission is blocking the U.S. nuclear umbrella for South Korea, and the second mission is attacking and taking over South Korea. Soon after, in September 2022, North Korea revised its nuclear weapons law and officially stated that the mission of its nuclear force is territorial completion, ryongto-vanjang. Literally translated, this means complete territorial establishment, conclusion, and rectification, which simply means annexing the South to complete what they see as their original national borders.
On December 30th, 2023, during a Workers' Party Congress, Kim Jong-un declared that North Korea and South Korea are now two independent hostile states and called for preparing a great event to subdue the entire territory of South Korea by mobilizing all means and forces, including nuclear weapons. These aggressive statements clearly suggest that North Korea's nuclear armament is still mainly aimed at reunification.
Some South Korean scholars argue that North Korea originally pursued nuclear weapons for regime survival, since it was poor and isolated at the time. But today, North Korea has nuclear weapons capable of deterring the U.S. nuclear umbrella, and it may believe it can easily overpower non-nuclear South Korea with its arsenal. If that's the case, North Korea may have returned to its original goal, reunification under its rule, or the communist takeover of South Korea.
For this reason, the United States and South Korea must assume that North Korea will attack and attempt to annex the South if favorable conditions arise, and they must strengthen their readiness accordingly. For more analysis on this topic, see the Chapter 2 of the author's book, Nuclear North Korea: Armed, Desperate, and Unpredictable. If you'd like to hear more related content, please click the subscribe button.